Hello and welcome back to English from the North, the podcast for learners of English from an intermediate to advanced level who want to enjoy their English with a bit more of a Scottish twist. My name is Lewis, and in this episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about travelling because I'm coming to you, well, at the point that this podcast is released, I will be in Elche. I'll be on my holidays, first holiday of the year, in a town called Elche in the community of Valencia in Spain. Big surprise, I'm in Spain, but as I'm recording this episode, it's the Sunday before. So I'm coming to you from the past, speaking about the present, and I'm having a good time, I assume. I'm having a fantastic time. I'm really enjoying it, like I say, I assume, but we'll see. But basically, I just wanted to talk about traveling today because traveling is kind of like the big payoff for language learning. It's this opportunity that you have to really put your skills into practice. You can really, leave the, if we want to think about it, and I'm going to do an episode really where I look at kind of the parallels between exercise and language learning. But I think that this is kind of like, if you think about your language learning and like the lessons and things like that, as the sort of training sessions, like you imagine a football player or a rugby player, the language lessons and the time spent on Anki or doing immersion, listening to podcasts, these are kind of like the training sessions, the sessions in the gym, the sessions in the training field, training with the team, and then traveling or working, using your target language in your job is like the playing the game on the Friday night or the Saturday night, the league match or whatever. So, and I think it's like that because it's where you really put it into practice, and you're kind of live. You're maybe you have these preoccupations about making errors and things like that because it's you're out there with people that aren't teachers and they're just going to talk to you like just like having a normal conversation with you, and that can be quite intimidating because I know that there are people who are worried about making errors and things like that, and worried about being misunderstood. But basically, I just wanted to make this episode to say, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. The important thing is to put yourself out there because there are so many benefits attached to it. I appreciate looking at the statistics for the people that listen to the podcast, that this is going to be easier for some than others. If we're talking about English, for example, I know that there are quite a few people listen from Argentina and Hong Kong and places like that. I appreciate for you guys. It might be a bit more difficult to go travelling to an English-speaking country than it is from the listeners from Germany or Spain or Finland, for example. Shout out, by the way, to the people from Finland. I received an email the other day that said this was apparently the 14th most listened to language learning podcast in Finland on Apple Podcasts. So shout out to the absolute legends listening on Apple Podcasts in Finland. I haven't had the time to visit your country yet, but I would love to in the future. Every Finnish person I've met has been absolutely hilarious. I don't know what it is. I think it's because sort of, at least the Finnish people I've met have been really good with this kind of, we'd say, deadpan, like serious humour, this quite dry humour, and I think that goes down really well with the British sense of humour. It's just a style of humour that we're really, really used to. So for whatever reason, it's we get them quite well. I mean, it's the sense of humour that really, really works with us. So hopefully in the not too distant future, I will have the chance to visit Finland. But thanks guys for listening. Thanks to everybody for listening. I really appreciate it, and it's fantastic to see that so many people from so many different countries are listening to this podcast. So thank you all. So let's get into this idea of traveling. How can you really maximize traveling? What's the way that you can get the most out of traveling when you want to speak your target language? And I'm going to talk in general about target language because this can be for people who are learning English, and I think there are some native English speakers that listen to this podcast as well. So maybe you guys can get some tips for speaking your target language in another country. The first piece of advice I would give you is try to really take advantage of the immersion. If you're going to another country, if you're going to a foreign country where they speak your target language, then you have this great opportunity to really immerse yourself in the culture, to immerse yourself in the language. In certain countries, you're going to find this immersion easier than in others. The good benefit, or one of the great benefits about being a learner of English, is that if you go to English-speaking countries, you're going to find it very, very easy to communicate in English and not your native language, because the standard of language learning especially in the UK, but I think it's the same in the US, in Australia, in all these countries, the standard of language learning is terrible. It is awful. I think there was a poll that showed that 70% of people in the UK couldn't hold a conversation in a foreign language. However, I don't think that poll excluded people who had a native language other than English in their household as they were growing up. Somebody maybe a language like Polish or Urdu or French or whatever. So I think if you excluded those people, kind of people who had like a family reason to learn another language, who had another language in the home, I can't imagine the number being higher than 10% of people. I think I think of the hundreds of people that I know or know of between my family, my friends, my work colleagues, all this kind of thing. I think that the number of people that I know that can speak a foreign language and hold a conversation in a foreign language is probably about 3 people. And I think that's being generous. I think the number would maybe be closer to 1 or 2, but it's pretty bad. So the good thing for you though, as a learner of English, is that you're going to find it very, very easy to communicate in English, because you won't be able to fall back on your native language, because there's simply the people here don't have the language skills. They're you're going to have to communicate in English, which is good because you can create this immersion. Another good way that you can really create this immersion and really make it stronger is, if possible, travel solo. Go by yourself. Don't travel with friends, don't travel with family, although I appreciate if you have kids and you're married and things like that, it's not possible, or maybe it's possible, but you might have an argument. It's not possible to travel solo. But if you do have the opportunity to travel solo, 100% do it. It's something that I have done for all of my holidays, bar one, for the last 5 years. I've always traveled solo. And why is traveling solo so good? Well, the main reason is you're on your own. You don't have another person who speaks your language that you can rely on, that you can revert back to, that you can, kind of hide away from the target language, if you will. You don't have this person that you can go, well, I'll just communicate with this person in my native language, because they're not there. So you need to communicate in your target language if you want to have conversations. If you want to avoid a holiday where you just sit by yourself and don't talk to anyone, then you need to communicate in your target language, and it forces you to put yourself out there. Another way that you can, or how you can combine this with something else to really boost your language learning, would be to stay somewhere like an Airbnb. However, stay in someone else's house. I know that there are plenty of options on Airbnb. Super popular in Spain for some reason. I'm not sure why, but there are loads and loads of places on Airbnb where you can stay with people in their house. And you can communicate there right away. You have somebody that you can communicate with in your target language. It's not as stressed as maybe in a restaurant, because they're not a waiter who's rushing around trying to serve hundreds and hundreds of tables and trying to do their job under pressure. It's someone that you can really kind of relax with and take your time to have a conversation. And at least in my experience, they've all been really, really lovely, really, really patient people. So it's great to have a conversation with, and that'll help you to really put your language skills into practice in a real situation. And this is going to help you, along with the whole immersion and everything like that. These things are really going to help you to come out of your comfort zone, and develop and push yourself as a person, because you don't have a choice. You can't hide behind the fear. You can't hide behind the worry and, what if I say this? What if I say that? What if I say this? You have to just go for it. You have to do it. Speaking from it personally, you get over the fear, you get over the worries of, what if I say something and this person makes fun of me? What if I make a mistake? Because the more that you do it, the more that you realize that, it's not that big a deal. It doesn't make a difference. If you make a mistake, who cares? Nobody's going to laugh at you, okay? Nobody's going to make fun of you. The important thing is that you're, communicating with these people. And oftentimes, the other person is grateful that you can speak their language. I mean, I've already given the case of the UK, where there are no foreign language skills, basically. So if you can communicate in English with these other people, they're like, oh, great, fantastic. I know what this person wants. I can do my job more easily because I can understand, more or less exactly what the person wants. Similar idea in Spanish. I've had Spanish people say this to me, that the level of English generally in Spain is so poor that people who speak Spanish, it's almost like people have this feeling of, oh, good, thank God, I don't have to speak English. You know, I don't have to use my English skills that I'm not very confident in. I can speak Spanish. So you see, these are people who are worried about speaking a foreign language, and by speaking Spanish, you're helping them out. So it's this whole thing. It's that, you know, it pushes you, it forces you to develop and things like that. I find that by pushing myself, that it gives me this desire to want to keep going, to want to keep learning a language, to want to keep putting in the work. To give an example of this, I talked in the 4th episode of the podcast about how I'd stayed in an Airbnb in Madrid, and I'd been talking to these guys that I was there with, and I'd originally stayed in this Airbnb with these 2 guys. One was from Venezuela, the other one was from Spain. I'd originally stayed with them in September of 2021 when I went out to Madrid for the first time, and then my level of Spanish wasn't very good. It was maybe an A1. It was like super basic stuff. I had to constantly Google Translate to put sentences together. I had to speak in English. The other guys had to speak in English. There was a bit of a problem because they weren't super confident in their English skills. My accent made things a bit difficult, even though I've said I don't have a particularly strong Scottish accent. But one of the issues, and one of the things I'm trying to do when I record this podcast, is force myself to speak a bit more slowly, because in my native normal accent, I tend to speak quite quickly. I think Scottish people in general can tend to speak quite quickly, and that was causing them a lot of problems. I mean, we still had a good time. They're still lovely guys. I still, you know, they were super helpful to me, but there definitely was this language barrier. So I went back there in April last year, and so it'd been, about a year and a half of learning Spanish since then, and my level of Spanish had improved to be like C1 level, like fluent level. I was able to have conversations with them completely in Spanish about politics, the current situation in the UK, all this kind of stuff. And they actually said to me, they were like, wow, we actually can't believe this. This is insane. I remember when you came, you could barely speak Spanish, and, you know, now we're having these full-on conversations, you know, full speed, all this kind of stuff. This is amazing. And you know, that really meant a lot to me when they said that. I was like, wow, he's right. You know, these 2 guys they're right. I can see the difference. I you know, I can feel the difference, and it's kind of like this feeling of, wow, you know, all my hard work paid off. Those hundreds of hours spent listening to podcasts or reading books or in language lessons, it's really paid off. You know, I can do this. It's like proving that, yeah, I can learn a language. This has all been worth it. I've been able to connect on a much deeper level, and that really fired me up. That really gave me this drive to want to keep going, to want to keep pushing, to want to keep developing. And so I think that's the other benefit for traveling, is it can give you this energy, it can give you this desire to want to keep learning, to want to keep going, keep on with the journey, that actually, you know what, all those hours that I've spent learning, it's worth it. It has a result, and the result is that I can communicate with these people and have these fantastic experiences. So as well as this, you know, as well as pushing you out your comfort zone, as well as helping you to develop and, you know, develop your self-confidence, to become more confident as a person, to fire you up as a learner, the other benefit, I would say, of traveling is that it allows you to discover the culture of the country that you're traveling to. Because it's important to remember that language isn't just a communication tool. It's not just a way for you to be able to express your ideas. You don't just learn a language to communicate. When you learn a language, you learn about the culture, you learn about the food, you learn about the history, you learn about the customs, you learn about the dances, you learn, you know, all this different kind of thing, or different kind of things, I should say, in plural. And that's the thing with traveling, is that if you travel, you can discover these things. You can learn more about the culture. You can go to the local museum and learn things about the history of the town that you're in. You know, if you stay in an Airbnb, other benefit of staying in an Airbnb, you can get local recommendations from people. Where are good places to go? What are some good traditional dishes to try? Is there anything that you would recommend me doing? Oh, you should go to this museum. Oh, you should try to book in to see this show. It's a type of traditional dancing from blah, 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 blah century or whatever. It's all these different kinds of recommendations, and you can really immerse yourself in the culture. You can really enrich yourself. You can really learn more, and it's another thing that makes the language learning worthwhile. Again, to give another example, the food in the UK, it's not very good. I'm going to make an episode on it at some point, although I think it's kind of a known thing online that, you know, it's a joke that British food it's not that great. Okay, it's not. It's good for a cold winter's day. I'll tell you that. British food is good for the terrible weather that we have here because it warms you up, it fills you up, and it makes you feel, nice and warm and what's the word we use? Content, I guess. It gives you this feeling. It's perfect for the weather that we have here. However, it's not very healthy. It doesn't look very good. It's not very imaginative, unfortunately. So one of the benefits of traveling for me personally is that I'm able to discover all this food, all these dishes, all these different cuisines that I've never tried, plates, well, I wouldn't say plates, that's a Spanish pronunciation thing, or a Spanish translation coming in there, but all these dishes, we would say dishes, all these dishes that I just don't exist in British culture, for example. My favourite Spanish dish is pulpo gallego, which is like Galician style octopus. We do not eat octopus in the UK. It just doesn't exist. It's just not a thing. When I worked in Tesco, which is this supermarket in the UK, just during the pandemic, it was the only job I could get after I finished uni. I worked on the fish counter, and at one point there was this foreign couple came up to the counter, and I don't know where they were from. I think they were from a Mediterranean country based on the accent. I'm not sure exactly which one. And they went, "Oh, do you have octopus?" And I had to say to them, "I'm sorry guys, but it's just not a thing here." I wish we did. I wish we sold it because it is delicious, but it's just not something that Scottish people, British people, it's just not something that we eat. It's just not part of the national diet. So we don't sell it because nobody would buy it. I'm sorry. And, by going to Spain, by going to another country, I was able to try it and I discovered that, wow, it tastes amazing. And so there we go. A perfect example of how language learning can help you to discover these things, can help you to discover these elements, these cultural elements that otherwise maybe don't exist in your own culture. And I think that's the great benefit of language learning. It's as well as being able to communicate with people, to relate to people on a more deeper level, to make friends with these other people, to have these deeper relationships. It also allows you to discover this culture that otherwise you wouldn't know about. And I think that's another fantastic benefit that makes language learning really, really worthwhile. So I think that just about covers everything for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little sort of look into the benefits of traveling and things like that. I'm going to keep on enjoying my holiday right now. I will do kind of a summary of Elche, how it went, what I liked about the city, how I was able to put my language skills into practice, if there are any other kind of language learning insights to come from that. So, stay tuned for that one at some point in the future. Once more, the link to the transcript is in the description. If you like what you hear and you want to keep supporting me, if you want to toss some spare change my way, the link to the Ko-fi is in the description as well. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.